Our lives are laid out on a road of bumps, turns, struggles, and more. How do we respond? How do we endure adversity for learning and growth? I'm Aubrey Johnson, and we'll explore these questions and more on the Road to Rediscovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and of course, pay it forward and uplift others who are struggling through dark times. Now, I'm here to tell you the Road to Rediscovery Stand Store is officially open. That's right, officially open. Inspired by the many amazing guests and interesting topics you've heard on this show, this store has all kinds of great resources focused on your personal growth, from free e-guides to wellness ebooks to the full-blown Rediscovery Roadmap digital course. Trust me, we got you covered for getting back on track with an action plan to conquer your adversities and to realize your true potential for success. Stop by and visit our store at stand.store/road to rediscovery. That's stand.store/road, the number 2, rediscovery. And as always, we are truly, truly grateful for your listenership. All right. My special guest is the father of 3 boys and the author of 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons, How You Can Raise Resilient Kids. Here he outlines his parenting techniques and the path of his sons through childhood, adolescence, all the way to and beyond the U.S. Naval Academy, Williams College, and West Point. He's been featured on USA Today, Parents Magazine, among others, and an Army veteran himself. He formerly worked for 3 members of U.S. Congress and served twice as a presidential appointee. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great honor to welcome Mr. Jeff Nelligan to the show. Jeff, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Wow. Well, Aubrey, it's great to be here. What a send up. My gosh, I'm blushing and I'm kind of tingling. There you go.
Oh, well, thank you. And you know what? We reciprocate. We're equally tingling. We are equally excited. We can't wait to get this thing started right off the road. So excited to have you here. So here's how I'd like for us to just kind of jump into this and unpack this, Jeff, if you don't mind here.
Certainly.
We are going to have some incredible insights, or you're going to share some incredible insights in the world of American parenting. But I want to just ask you, how accurate is this, if accurate at all? I personally am a believer that our parenting styles can often be a combination of things that we've learned to do from watching our parents and things that we've learned not to do by watching our parents. Start us off on what you experienced as a child growing up.
Certainly. I like that beginning because the parent of today was the kid of parents yesterday.
Yes.
And watching the parents and how they dealt with all sorts of situations, good and bad, great jobs, lost jobs.
Yes.
The neighborhoods you lived in, the way they treated each other, your mom and dad, the way they treated the adults in the community, and equally important, the kids in the community.
Yes.
I had great fortune. I was blessed. I had superb parents, and they were old school. They were from, the greatest generation, and they passed down what today we call values, but for them was just the way of life. And It inculcated all the values that I put into the book.
Man, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. And you have to have a foundation from somewhere, right? and this is clearly your foundation. So I want to thank you for sharing, sharing that and giving us a glimpse into, what that was like for you growing up. And if it appears that I'm kind of darting back and forth, I apologize, but I hope, can appreciate where we're going to go with this. I want to ask you a point blank question now, Jeff.
Sure.
Are children more resilient and tougher than we give them credit for?
I wish they were, but there's too many statistics out there that will tell us that we've got a generation of children that is less resilient, perhaps less
Hmm.
resilient, definitely, than, let's say, if you're looking at the iGen generation born around 1909,
Yeah.
Gen Z around 1997, the millennials 1981. I think over the course of those generations, you see numbers of just behavioral and otherwise physical
Yeah.
that would demonstrate that no, they're not as resilient. When you've got 44% of kids are identified by their own parents as having a mental health malady.
Mm,
Children between the ages of 10 and 18 are spending approximately 8 hours and 47 minutes a day on a phone or
yeah.
screen. When kids 3 to 5 are spending over 90 minutes a day on a screen.
Wow.
When 21% of children in this country are overweight or obese, one out
Yeah.
of five.
Yeah.
So you look at those markers, and those psychological, physical, emotional.
Mhm.
No, I don't think they're as resilient as past generations.
Gotcha. Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense, and that is some true to life examples
Yeah.
in backing that up for sure. Um, you know, there you just mentioned something regarding technology
Yeah.
devices and things like that, and there was something on your blog that I found quite fascinating, and it's something that I truly believe that it's a must do for any of today's parents. Um, you talk about ending the digital addiction nightmare and
Yeah.
and entering into agreements with with your children, and I wanted to
Mhm.
know if you could please share some insight in that, particularly the importance of accountability and demonstrating that in
Yeah.
what you mentioned in the blog.
Certainly, the the guru behind my thoughts on the digital addiction nightmare is a man named Dr. Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah.
1 year ago, yesterday, believe it or not, he published a book called The Anxious Generation, which is full of stats, data,
Yeah.
long-term studies of kids, and showing that the increasing use of digital media is making kids, no surprise, more anxious. So
Yeah.
I started with following Haidt 15 years ago, when he was beginning to make a name for himself in terms of this phenomenon, along with a woman named Dr. Jean Twenge out of San Diego State University.
Yeah.
And the the conclusions they reached back then are the same ones they've reached now, only we've had 15 years of a laboratory test, and the saturation, the addiction has only gotten worse. So the idea, and this was kind of Haight's, but others picked up on it, was to have what you were looking at there, Aubrey, was the social media contract. And I
Yes.
like the word you used, accountability. And the social media contract is simple. You sit down with your kids one day and you say, you know what? This has all got to end because you're a zombie. Now, this is very,
Right.
very harsh talk. It's very direct.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the kid that you don't sit down with and say at age 12, your screen time is going to be greatly diminished, and you're playing Call of Duty and the laptop and the iPad, that same kid at 24, 12 years later, is going to be living in your basement playing Minecraft.
100%. 100%.
Okay. Now that sounds really harsh. And
Yeah.
guess what? It is, because those examples are all around us.
Yeah.
48% of males between the ages of 18 and 32 live with their parents.
My goodness.
Again, you can talk about anecdotes, but the numbers bring it home. Haight's book, Anxious Generation, is crammed with these kind of data points and statistics. Again,
Yeah.
long-term studies, extensive studies done as from his professorship at New York University.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Man, I mean, and that those are staggering numbers, and they just continue to grow. It seems like, and it's basically with our generation being the parent generation, the parental generation. Quite frankly, it's a disservice to the children
Right.
in preparing them for the world out there by
And, and
letting
we're
them do this, right?
That's correct. Preparing is another good word, because by starting with the social media contract, you prepare them for that new world. That is,
Yes.
you're getting an hour on a screen a day.
Yes.
And on
Yes.
the weekends, Friday night at 10, it's going away.
Yeah.
And at 8 o'clock at night, we're shutting down the routers in the house. And you're
Wow.
not bringing it out in the car, or
Yeah.
you're not bringing it out at the dinner table.
Yeah.
So and then at the same time, and this is why I use the word accountability too, because Aubrey, we spoke about this earlier. The parent, as we both kind of agreed, has to set the example. So the parent is the one that cannot be on the phone, on the
Completely.
screen at an enormous
Absolutely.
rate. The actual number for people 18 to 50 is around 11 and a half hours a day on a screen, either phone, laptop, iPad.
That's a lot of time.
Right, that is. And you wonder, you're on that screen that long. Yes, certainly some of it's for work.
Yeah.
That
Sure.
some of that time could be spent with your kid.
Sure could.
And the 9 hours the kid's spending on his phone could be spent, if you cut it to 1, could be spent with you. Again,
Yeah.
this is, I'm giving you the kind of a badass, harsh elucidation of all this, but it's only shock treatment that's going to work. I mentioned the 12-year-old, and I say that because by the age of 12, 75% of the time we're going to spend with our kid is over.
That's right.
By the time that he's 18 or she is 18, it's 90%. So if you don't drill these kind of qualities and characteristics into a kid early, the culture raises them. And I'm not certain there's any reasonable person on the planet that thinks the culture is going to be good for raising a kid.
No, not at all. I mean, it starts in the home and it starts early. And that's how I was raised to believe. And that's how I raised, my son. And so, coming at it harsh. And if it is shock treatment that's needed, especially given the dynamic of today's society with so much technology, so much inundation of screen time in so many different ways. Now AI is coming into play and everything, and I think we mentioned this in a past conversation we had. Both my parents served, and so being a military brat, my siblings and I, we moved around a lot. And so, mom and dad came down on us, with a lot of rules, chores, when to be in bed, when to get up, and just everything as far as, keeping your room clean, the bed is made, clothes are folded, just goes on and on, right? And so I get into my early teens, and I just hear this stuff, and parents were loving, very loving as well, but every other thing it felt like coming out of their mouths was a rule, or did you do this or did you do that, and then one time I just, dad and I, we kind of, we his thing, he loved going to play the ponies, loved going to the racetrack. So that was the way I connected with them. I mean, I wish I could have said, him and I tossed the ball in the backyard, but it wasn't like that with him and I. He had different interests and things. And so, to connect with him, I'd go with him to the racetrack. I was 14, 15. And I just looked at him one time and I said, Dad, man, I appreciate everything you provide, but I just want to know, man, so many rules, and our younger brother, he's of a different time where he's used to things being told to him in a kind way, and that's not how it was with my sister and I, being the older two. And so, I didn't ask him why, but I'm just like, it's a lot. And then he looked at me and he calmly said, and he only did this one time and he didn't have to say it anymore. He looked at me calmly, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Son, I wouldn't say a word if I didn't care."
Yeah.
And that's all that he's had to say. That's all he had to say. I wouldn't say a word if I didn't care. And so from there, to me, that just said it all. And it taught me to read between the lines, get the true message underneath how it's delivered, and have a more cerebral type of response to it, and a little less emotional, especially if you feel like someone's coming down on you, like your parent. He wouldn't say anything if he didn't care. So to me that, it kind of taught me some lessons from him, just saying, that phrase right there, which brings me to my next question, Jeff,
Mhm.
regarding real world and real world lessons. Okay. I want to ask this, if you can share specifically in your experience in raising your boys. Um, what was the first real world lesson that you had to give your boys early in their childhood? And if you can share, maybe what was that lesson?
Certainly, and I must say that's a very touching story about your father, and I adore it because that's an engaged parent is going to say that kind of thing. An engaged
Yeah,
parent is going to say there are rules for a reason. The
yeah,
disengaged parent, you're never going to get a straight boundary ever.
right.
And if you don't have a straight boundary when you're, let's say, 14 or 15, like you were at the track, when you're 25 or 25, 6, you still don't have a boundary.
You still don't have a
And
boundary.
you're
100%.
floundering around. In terms of examples, the one that I think really kind of set the tone, and it was followed by many others, but one stands out in particular in my mind is
Mhm.
I was with the boys at a big mall, indoor mall here in the DC area,
Mhm.
and just Saturday, surging crowds, noise, typical pandemonium. And I took my wallet out of my pocket and I opened it and I said, gave each kid a $5 bill. And I said, guys, go get change. I don't care how long it takes. It's not a race, but don't come back here. And I'll be standing right here trying to keep an eye on you, but go get change and come back. Now, the eldest was about 7, the youngest was 4.
Okay.
And off they went. They were excited about a task that was
Yes.
going to be something out of the normal realm of life. And so they,
Right.
it took some time. One kid struck out a couple stores. Another kid came back with 20 quarters in his pocket. They all
Mhm.
came back and they were enthused. They'd taken this challenge out of nowhere and navigated on their own in the midst of strangers in a strange place this task. So I would replicate that all the time. And then I would do different shifts. We'd show up to a 7-Eleven and I'd point to the 5-year-old and say, here's a $20 bill. Go
Yeah.
and get, Gatorade and Doritos.
Yeah.
Or we'd be at a restaurant and I'd point to the 6-year-old and I'd say, you memorize our entire order and tell the waiter what we're going to have.
Right.
And so those tests on and on and on. And, you know, we're at an airport and they're a little bit older. And I just give one kid the paperwork and I say, hey, go get us 5 boarding passes.
Nice.
I don't know how you do it. You have to go up to at that point, there was not too many kiosks. So you actually
Right.
had to go up to a human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they learned that that life was presented them with these challenges that they had to do on their own amidst strangers, and they had to get over this mild adversity. And of course, I explained, a guy who can do that at 4 years old, walk into store after store to get change. That same guy is 24 years old, and he's officer of the deck on a guided missile destroyer in the Persian Gulf at midnight, and Iranian patrol boats are coming at him, and he's in a minefield.
Mm.
And the kid can make a decision. He can react to that adversity because his whole life has just been this reflexive reaction to different situations and challenges.
Right.
And so at 24, he can make that and make the right decision and, be responsible at the same time for 250 guys on the ship. So that's how it plays out in the real world because, Aubrey, we talked about this too. Our job as parents, in my humble opinion, is not just to build a relationship with our child. We already have that.
Right.
Our job is to teach that kid to build a relationship with the world that's right outside the front door. And that could be the neighborhood, or it
Yep.
could be the Boy Scouts, or it could be
That's right.
athletic fields, the school,
Yep.
the barber shop, the mall, the robotics club.
Yeah.
But the idea that the kid can move with grace and with ease through all sorts of different circumstances and not panic.
100%. It's a big world out there. And you know
Yeah.
what? I mean, and I don't want to sound selfish or anything, but we as parents want to be assured that our son, our daughter who goes out that door into the world, that they're prepared and they're ready for it. But
Right.
we have to own the part in preparing them. And that lesson, those lessons that you kind of repeatedly and incrementally have kind of instilled in your boys' heads with just random tasks, that's huge because it gives them the problem solving skills,
Right.
specifically when they're
Yeah.
by themselves with around a bunch of people, a space they're not familiar with, people they're not familiar with,
Yes.
and make decisions and problem solve through a situation, to figure things out. And I mean, I call it the sink or swim syndrome, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
as harsh as it may sound, I mean, back in the day, right? Our uncle would pick us up, and whether we knew how to swim or not, we're 2, 3 years old, and he goes over into 6 feet and he tosses you in the water. Well, what are you going to do? Flap your arms, or are you just going to sink like a stone? Guess I'm going to have to figure it out. But it's kind of like that, and to me that just sharpens the sword even more and more and more as
Oh, yeah.
they get older, to where they are sharp enough to make these decisions when they're out on the Persian Gulf, like you mentioned
Yeah,
with.
and, I like that problem solving. That's really what it is.
Mhm.
And once you start problem solving at age 4 or age 5 or 6, you and you continue to do it, it's like the old, athletic adage, muscle
Yeah.
memory. It
Yes.
becomes a reflex that you know what to do, that even if you're in a tight situation, you don't panic. You start to think, "How do I get out of this?" Or, "How do I get
Exactly.
around it?"
Exactly.
There's not this curl up in a little ball, or, the whining about it, or just a reflexive defensive measure. No, you know how to charge through it. Again,
Right.
this is, I'm bringing it in hot here, but I always think that parents need to hear it because, as I said, by the age of 12, 75% of their time they've been around that kid is over.
It sure
25
is.
25% is left from 12 to whenever that parent passes on.
Yeah, and that's time you're not gonna get back.
Never, never.
No, no, we have to maximize that, and not just for our benefit and being in the present moment to enjoy, but for their benefit in sharpening their problem-solving skills, improving their discipline, and letting them know that there is a whole world out there that is more tangible, more meaningful than any software that or device that you have in your hands.
Yes.
Okay, and that's truly something that you must embrace first, right?
Right, because
Yeah,
if you don't, and I like that, yeah, that software in your hand is,
yeah,
pretty meaningless in the real world, because now we have the Gen Z is now entering the real world.
yeah,
And some big surveys done by Forbes and Wallet Hub have shown, and big surveys, 2,500 plus,
yeah.
have shown, looking at managers who hire Gen Z, they note that 65% of Gen Z new hires are fired within the first year
Yeah, oh wow, yeah, that's
because they're
yep.
continually late to meetings. They don't wear the right things to work.
No,
Their work product is substandard, and that, many employers now, something around 28%, don't even look at Gen Z. They'll go with older workers because they can't afford the time and
yeah,
the effort. But the best stat from the two surveys was this. We were talking, you were talking about, you know, being there in the moment and the kids standing up.
right.
33% of Gen Z kids bring their parent to their first employment interview.
Is that right? I had
Yeah.
no idea.
1 out of 3 Gen Z
Yeah,
applicants to a job will bring their parent to an interview. Now, if that doesn't show how you wonderfully begun this resilience,
yeah,
gosh, nothing does.
nothing does. Let's break down that a little bit, okay? I want to make sure first off that I'm tracking you in saying this data point, um, because I've never heard of it before, and it gives me an initial impression. Um, Gen Z bringing their parent to their first interview.
Yeah. 1 out of 3.
1 out of 3.
Correct.
Okay. I'll be honest with you, Jeff. I'm not quite sure how to think of that.
I don't know. It's unbelievable to even consider. And of course, if you're a hiring manager and you're either in your office or on a Zoom call and
Yeah.
mom or dad is sitting next to junior, you're thinking, how quick can I end this?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
How fast can I get both those fannies out the door? You
Yes.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. As an employer, I would be thinking that, and
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
and another thing I would be thinking, I guess, kind of facetiously, is hey, it's not like the young adult is 17, 18, and
Right.
they're a star athlete, and I'm a coach from a D1 college trying
Right.
to recruit him or her, and need to talk to the parents as well because it's his education. They haven't graduated from high school. This is beyond high school
Yeah. This
graduation.
is
They're
after
an adult.
college. This is
It's after.
23 or 24. Yeah.
My gosh, yes, that is. I mean, if that doesn't spell ill preparedness in my mind, I don't know what does. I
Well,
mean,
it goes back to the resilience factor. The
yeah,
guy, the kid, male or female, is not comfortable around other human beings
yeah,
because I guess that's the outgrowth of spending 8 hours and 47 minutes a day on a screen. The,
yeah.
the, the idea of social interaction is a challenge rather than a natural every moment, every day type of endeavor.
That's what it sounds like, and it's basically kind of reversing that screen time, right? It's more the rule than the exception, and
Yeah,
yeah, and that's an unfortunate data point,
yeah,
quite
it is.
frankly. But
And again, and the screen time and what it does to anxiety, particularly young girls,
yeah,
as I said, it's all documented in Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation, which was for weeks and weeks #1 on the New York Times bestseller list because so many parents were buying it and kind of waking up to the kind of monsters that had been created in their kids.
oh, I see, yeah, yeah, and I mean, and again, to your point, at age 12, right? Uh,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, you're gonna start to get considerably less time with your
Oh, yeah.
child, and it makes it harder to undo something that you've done or that was
Right.
done, at that
Right.
point.
And that's the shock treatment factor. That's the
Yeah,
social media contract um, coming into play because if changing a kid at 12, it's almost like putting them on lockdown.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. They're like, I
And
can't believe you're doing this to me.
right, and guess what?
Yeah.
I'm doing it now, so you're not in the basement 12 years from now
Yep.
playing Call of Duty. It's real
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah. You'll thank me later.
Yeah,
Oh gosh, you mentioned something about society and social media, obviously, and particularly the statistic with girls. I wanted to ask you regarding societal influence on raising resilient kids. Um, can you use the same methods um, in raising girls as you do boys to teach mental toughness, mental strength, as I put it often, and resilience? Um, uh, but is there, I don't know, is there some sort of societal influence that kind of is making it more of a challenge to be consistent in teaching that resilience between boys and girls?
yeah, and Jonathan Haidt goes into that in his book that
Okay.
the real the link between particularly Instagram, Snapchat,
Yeah.
TikTok on young women and in terms of their bodies
Yeah.
and just the influencer crowd. But you can the same qualities that I taught my kids, the four that are in the book, personal conduct, confidence, resilience in adversity, and
Yeah.
ambition.
Yes.
You can teach girls too. I mean, all you have to do is look at the NC2A, Sweet 16 going on right now
That's
in
right.
women's basketball.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the colleges across this country are full of young women who are leaders. Even the
Yeah.
ones that sit on the bench are the leaders. So
Yes.
the idea that they don't exist, of course they do. They're all out there. I mean, you had a woman run for president, five,
Yeah.
6 months ago. Uh, you know, Christine Lagarde is head of the European Union. I mean,
Yeah.
there's plenty of role models for women out there that are not Madonna or Lady Gaga.
No.
It's just
No.
giving them the prominence they deserve. Um,
100%.
so I don't think there's any difference at all. I think girls have it tougher. I think the society is misogynistic,
Yeah.
and I think there's I don't know why. I don't know why that attraction. Maybe it's a centuries old thing that boys maybe are less influenced by the culture around them, or they're equally influenced, but the culture is so misogynistic that women and young girls have to conform a little bit, and that's a shame.
Yeah, that is a shame. I mean, but it seems like in spite of that, we are starting to see a surge of more female leaders
Oh yeah,
in different areas, from military to athletics, whether it's professional athletics or collegiate athletics,
right,
to yeah, to uh, uh, public service, right?
right.
Yeah, and to me, that's quite impressive. I hope it continues in that trend, and I hope as it continues in that trend, the misogyny hopefully can kind of mitigate a little bit. Um,
Yeah, you hope
yeah,
that happens. I mean, look, the White House press secretary is a female.
yeah, that's true.
She's 28 years old and she's a ball breaker.
Yeah,
She
she is
already
pulls no
already
punches.
tell that she's one of the best to fill that position. And I know that because in Washington, D.C., I was a press secretary for members of Congress and cabinet officials.
Yep.
So I had the same job she does. And she's 100 times better than I ever was. And she's 28 and she is just forceful. So,
Wow.
these women role models are all around us. And it's
Yeah.
too bad that more women, can't appreciate that or see that.
Agreed.
And more
Yeah.
men, obviously. I mean, that's a given, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is a given, but I would like for more women to see that as well. And Jeff, this is an extraordinary journey of conversational journey that we're going on, because we're hitting and touching different areas. And you touched in one area I wanted to kind of bring back a little bit if we can, and
Sure.
that's it's sports.
Yeah.
Talking about sports from the most elementary level uh, to the most visible, I guess,
Yeah,
at the
you bet.
pro level. The the What impact or what role of significance does as something as like sports plays in adjusting the mindset of one growing up for resilience?
Well, it's a topic we talked about, and your wonderful son making his way, up the ladder, which is Jacob's ladder to the stars in terms of
Yeah,
basketball. But
yeah,
sports does three things, and it does three things really well. Being on a team means, number one, that you have to get along with a lot of people, and some of them you might not like, but
right.
you still have to get along with them.
Yep,
So you instill that sense of camaraderie. The second thing about sports is if you want to get your fanny off the bench, you've got to exert the personal discipline to practice whatever the sport is.
right.
And that means a lot of lonely nights and days doing that sport, whether it be lifting weights or running or throwing a lacrosse ball against a wall
Yes,
or
yes.
pushing tires across a football field.
That's right.
And the third thing that's great about sports is because it's life. In sports, there's a scoreboard at the end, and there's a winner and a loser.
That's right.
And you know, there's no platitudes, there's no equivocation. You won or you lost. And if you
That's
get
right.
too complacent losing, then that's not is going to set a great example for how you're going to accept the real world challenges in life, like
Right.
getting into college and doing well in college and getting a job and doing
Yes.
well at that and having friends and hopefully a wife or a husband down
Yes.
the line. So those are the three elements. Now the sports metaphor is easy. And I always say this because, yeah, and I say this because my sons were pretty darn good at sports. I'll come
Yeah.
back to that in a moment.
Mhm.
Sports metaphor is in the theater. It's in the marching band. It's in the robotics club. It's in the
Mhm.
Boy Scouts. It's in any kind of thing where you bring a bunch of like-minded kids together, pursuing a goal with supportive parents and, extending it through a season, whatever the season is,
Right.
months, several
Right.
months, weeks,
Yep.
so that you get that shared group together. And that's what builds the characters, the characteristics in my book. Now, when you talk about from the beginning, like you framed the question, from the lowest to the highest, the most visible, I'm actually pretty fortunate because my kids started out just like any other kids, average kids, no great big size. Speed was taught to all three of them. But, from fourth grade on in soccer and lacrosse, all the way through elementary and junior high and high school, they got better and better and better and started on better and better teams.
Yep.
And all three played in college.
Yep.
And the youngest not only played in college, he played at West Point rugby, a sport that he just walked on the field as a freshman, as a plebe, having never even touched a rugby ball or seen a rugby match.
Incredible.
And 4 years later was first team All-American, a national champion, MVP of the national championship series in Houston, and then was drafted and plays pro rugby for the DC Old Glory team.
Amazing.
And now I will say, this is pro rugby. It's not pro football. It's not even
Right.
pro
Right.
soccer in terms of popularity in this country.
Right.
You go anywhere else in Europe or in South America, and you can easily
Australia.
fill, yeah, Australia,
Yeah.
precisely. Anywhere
Yeah.
in the Pacific Islands,
Yeah.
you can fill a stadium with 50 or 60,000 people every weekend.
Easy.
Here,
Easy.
it's just not the sport of the country, and that's the way it works. But
Right.
what I'm saying is all those qualities are built through sports, and they're just enhanced every time. And, if you're lucky enough to get to college, 8% of all the kids who play in high school will play a college sport.
Right.
And mostly that's at Division II and Division III level. And
Yep.
indeed, Division III number of teams is in the hundreds for almost every sport because it's cheap. But the characteristics you get out of those three things that I mentioned, the camaraderie,
Yeah.
personal discipline,
Yeah.
and the win-loss is invaluable for the rest of your life.
It completely is. And as you said earlier, Jeff, I mean, sports is an easy metaphor to
Right.
to go
Yeah.
into, right? And I'm glad you mentioned the others because, I was going to ask you as well, not all children are interested in sports to that
Right.
degree, right? So
Yeah.
what other areas of interest could you explore teaching resilience or reinforcing resilience to in that child's mind that they may have an interest in? You mentioned band, you mentioned theater, you mentioned sciences. I mean, and those are other areas.
Mhm.
Scouts.
Yeah.
It's a group of people, young people coming together for a season with a common goal, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and so that's applicable in just about every facet.
Right. And that's the thing about sports and those other endeavors.
Yeah.
There's winners and losers. I
Yes.
know again, this is taking the hard road here,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a kid sees that immediately.
Yep.
So the kid hopefully will want to become a winner or better. Their team, their robotics team wants to win the county title. So those
Exactly.
kids are going to try. And the guys who are in second
Yeah.
place,
Yep.
good for them, but they didn't try enough. Third place, same thing.
Yeah.
But you're getting that sense of competition. This is
Yes.
an insanely competitive world.
Yeah.
And when you have those qualities, competition comes easier to you and it's easier to handle and manage. If you're never in a competition, then mom and dad are sitting there across the desk from a hiring manager.
Fast forward, right?
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's where
yeah,
you are.
yeah. 100% agreed, and that's what that's what it translates to, because you don't know how to compete against other applicants, or how to have a competitive edge
Right.
versus other applicants, or your parents didn't even teach you the fundamentals or the some of the basic ways that you can set a great first impression to a potential employer, okay, and make yourself memorable in a good
Right.
way, make a positive impact to where you get that second call.
And
But
and
yeah,
the confidence not to even have your parent in the same zip code when you're
a
sitting down
hundred
with some
percent.
hiring manager. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
again, it it does sound kind of, I mean, it's only 30% show up that way, but
yeah,
it's 65% that get fired, and it's above 50% for every indus of office life, whether it be the wrong clothes, projects late, showing up late, spending too much time on a phone.
yeah.
It's all those elements that show a person that just doesn't have the ability to act in a social and civic manner at an age of 24, 25. And what's
Yeah,
the end game on that, Aubrey?
yeah, that's a great
30 that the
question.
same way? Are they going to underscore some, metamorphosis and change completely?
That's a great question, Jeff, and I'm not even going to attempt to try to answer that, but one thing that comes to mind when you ask that question, I took it as a rhetorical question, but one
Sure. Oh,
thing
yeah.
one thing I truly was thinking and asking myself when you asked that question is is it starting to evolve to where, say, Gen Z are kind of misrepresenting themselves in the evolution of the younger generation style of work? Okay.
Yeah.
The younger generation style of work, I don't know how many 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 year at one place Gen Zers are going to be down the line, because I probably won't be here. Okay. But I'm hard pressed to see the newer generations as having, instead of 25 years at one company, they may have 25 years in an industry,
Right.
and
At
that's
20
spread,
companies.
yeah, at 20 companies or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I'm seeing more of that, and more of it being uh, an employee market, so to speak, to where they call the shots in terms of what their demands are to be an employee at this company, instead of what we grew up with the employer basically saying, this is our company, this is how we work, this is what
Right.
we offer, take it or leave it, you know.
Yeah.
So there's an evolution there. But when you have that, let's say that small percentage of those who come to those interviews with their parents, and those who show up late or not dressed appropriately, there seems to be some sort of, I don't know. I would hope it would be a misrepresentation and not the true representation of a younger generation in in how they show up.
Right. And, I mentioned the showing up part because that statistic just absolutely, befuddled the
Yeah,
researchers at Forbes and Wallet Hub. But the other stat is if you're losing almost 7 out of 10 after the first year, you got a
yeah,
major problem.
yeah,
And it, you know, you began this by talking about generations, the whole conversation, the generations of our parents
yeah.
raising us, um, my dad, when he was 15, worked in a vanadium mine in the Sierra Mountains, a mile below the surface of the earth.
Oh my.
And then at age 17, he went in the Navy. At 18, he was part of the Battle of Okinawa, and he spent his 19th birthday patrolling the streets of Tokyo.
My goodness. Isn't that
So,
something?
but most members of that generation did something like that. Oh,
Yeah,
and by the way, he grew
yeah,
up during the Depression in a small town.
yeah,
So you talk about the resiliency of different generations.
yeah,
That's that generation. We had it
yeah,
much easier.
yeah.
But can you imagine the juxtaposition of, old Don Nelligan and kids today at 18.
Yeah, big disparity,
Yeah.
big difference, right?
And the thing is, I can be labeled as just a crazy throwback machine guy, but those those are the kind of guys and women like my mom who
Yeah.
build a society.
Oh, completely. No.
And so and now Gen Z is the largest generation alive. They're at about 73 million.
Oh, wow.
That's
Okay. Yeah.
that's they're taking over. So that
Yeah, they
Gen Z
are.
in 10 years is going to be, well, 10 years, born in 96,
Yep.
it's going to be, gosh, 38, 39. And
Right.
will they own homes? Will they uh, be able to have children? Uh,
Yeah.
will they have consistent jobs?
Right.
Uh, what kind of economic power will they have? And so
Yeah.
it's not just, oh, the old man screaming about his dad working in a mine. No, it's in
No.
10 years from now we'll see it. We're already seeing it. Like I
Yep.
said, 7 out of 10 are fired. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, again, it sounds like a doomsaying thing, but it goes back to what Haidt was writing about, Jonathan Haidt, in 2010 when these kids were 14.
Yeah. Yeah. And
These
it's
This is bad for them. It's going to have major impacts longitudinally on their lives. And he was
yeah.
right.
Oh, totally. I
So
mean, we can see it happening. It's starting to happen. It's unfolding right before us. And yeah, I mean, uh that is really, really interesting. I mean, as far as Gen Z now being the largest population
yeah,
on this earth, and I can understand why and everything, but and the disparity, right, between say a 19-year-old of the of the
greatest generation.
greatest generation who gave birth to the baby boomers, right? And then versus a 19-year-old now. I mean, back then men lied about their age so they can get in
Yeah,
and grab a rifle, right? And stand post and everything. And so yeah, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, completely fascinating, it
And
almost
as an observer of this too, I can tell you the only
yeah.
place you can find a 19-year-old like my old man
Mhm.
is in the Navy or the Marine Corps or the Air
Oh,
Force, the Army,
easy. Yeah.
because these kids have made this decision. And, there's a lot of people that think that
Mhm.
they're different kids or not smart or, violent or whatever. They made a
Yeah.
decision to live in an institution and a structure that's demanding things just like your dad did. If you
Yes.
want to go back to your old man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other part of that too is that today, 73% of American youths who are eligible to join the service are ineligible. They
Really.
can't pass the basic tests, academic tests to get into services.
Right.
Their health problems, mostly obesity,
Yeah. Yeah.
medication,
Yep.
law enforcement, or disciplinary records. So
Right.
72% of all kids within that age group, which is 18 to about, normally cut it off around 28, 10 years, a decade,
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
would be turned away from trying to volunteer for any of the armed services.
Aren't they still required to register at
Well, yeah,
18?
they register to selective service,
Yeah. Okay. All
but
right.
they can register. But what are you going to do with them if you actually have to call them up? You
Yeah.
know,
Nope.
oh
Nope.
my
You're
gosh,
right. No,
you
that's
know,
true. What are you going to do with them? Right.
right? You don't
So,
get participation trophies in basic training. I
no,
know.
you don't.
I went
Again,
there.
winners, losers. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, it sounds very apocalyptic, but it didn't in 2010 when Haidt started writing about this stuff.
Yeah.
And now he's got a best-selling books that just details in great detail the damage. So I'll
Would
leave it at
imagine.
that. I'll get off my soapbox,
No,
Aubrey. My
no, no, that's quite all right, Jeff, and I appreciate you saying this, right? Because,
God.
I mean, people take things differently, and when I hear this, I don't hear apocalyptic, I don't hear the world's coming to an end, but I'm hearing hey, here's a heads up, you know?
Yeah.
And when you hear it in a constructive way, then I think the next step that your mind takes you on is, okay, how can I do my part or
Hmm.
resolve it in the areas in which I can control as a parent to my child, right? And
Or
imagine if
also for
each,
all people. That's because that's what you're doing on
yeah,
this podcast.
oh yeah, yeah,
All the
absolutely,
people that you interview have a way, have their prescription,
yeah,
and maybe that it's not all of the prescription is there, but Aubrey drags out what is going to be useful to people
yeah.
who listen.
Oh, completely. Yeah. It has to be something that people find of value and that's relatable in terms of what their adversities are, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and look, one thing that's consistent in all of our lives, we all have
Yeah,
adversities, right?
right.
Yeah, yeah. So Jeff, one of the last questions I wanted to ask you,
Sure.
okay, is you know, you shared some incredible insights on resilience, mental toughness, mental strength, really, really hitting targeted between the eyes and, what should be, what shouldn't be, what is what and where this country is headed in terms of, generationally. Um, I want to see if we can kind of temper that with another element that I feel is important in teaching, along with that resilience, along with that mental toughness, right? Um, Compassion for your fellow man,
Oh yeah.
empathy, right? Respect, right? You get what you give, basically. Showing love and compassion for your fellow man, showing empathy, respect, not kicking anyone while they're down, right?
Right.
I mean, everyone has tough times. Um, uh, can you maybe share with us some insight in how you balance out this type of resilience raising, okay, along with just some areas of compassion and empathy that I feel are equally important.
Sure.
Sure.
In fact, that's so important to me. It's the first chapter of the book called personal conduct.
Yes. Oh, nice. Very
You
nice.
all my kids, I pounded into don't I sound like a great dad?
Yeah.
You know, you have
Yes.
a private code of personal conduct,
Yes.
and that means everything from showing up on time, showing up early to anything, to wearing the right clothing, using the right language,
Mhm.
to listening more than speaking,
Thank
which
you.
I think is the key one.
Yes.
And the last one, just the respect you hold for anybody,
Yes.
whether it's a 2-year-old kid or a 52-year-old man or
Yeah.
whatever. That's all in the first chapter, because you start. That's the building block of character is compassion. Um,
Completely.
so you start with that, and then you move on to the other things, because hopefully you have that foundation of compassion, and then you can move on to really dealing with the real world that is out there. You do it a lot
Yes.
better if you've got that compassion.
100%. And it is foundational. I truly believe that.
Yeah,
And you've demonstrated that in having it as the first chapter of your book,
yeah.
which, by the way, I'm still making my way through. I would have had it done by now if my wife and I didn't get hit with uh, bronchitis over the weekend, man.
Oh
Oh,
goodness.
yeah, it was rough, my goodness. But we're out of the woods, we're on the upswing, and so I picked the book back up. So I want to thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to give the listeners an opportunity to get a copy of that book as well. So, Jeff, how can the listeners follow you, connect with you, learn more about the great publications and other discussions you've had with other publications, as well
Sure.
as get a copy of the book?
The
Yeah.
best place, Aubrey, is for folks to go to my website where all my blogs and podcasts and books are. It's called nelliganbooks.com.
Okay.
And then I have an X page at Resilient Sons, an Instagram page, Nelligan_books, and a Facebook page, Jeff Nelligan Books. And all four places, just shows the various, timelines of stories about my sons and what they're doing now in terms of their military careers. Two are naval officers. One, as I mentioned, plays pro rugby, but he also will be going back to infantry officer school in fall of this year at Fort Benning. So those are the places where I can be found.
That is wonderful, Jeff. We are going to put each of those social media handles as well as your nelliganbooks.com for the website in the episode show notes so the listeners can follow you on social media, go to your website, look at the different books, check out the blog while listening to this wonderful conversation. I just want to, again, thank you for coming on the show, sharing your insights. I truly appreciate it. The listeners appreciate it. And I hope we can stay in touch and bring you back on the show in the near future.
I'd love that, Aubrey. And thanks for such a great interview and just kind of lead me down the path, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's so great to have you, man. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. And hey, look, you may feel like this at times, but in our daily struggles and adversities, hope is always around the corner. And you're never, never alone. And when it really comes down to it, we're just all roadies on this journey of life. But it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Roads Rediscovery. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at roadsrediscoverypodcast@gmail.com and leave us any questions or comments you may have.